Good evening, YouTube. Who's your Piper, aka Mark, coming at you from the backyard. My garden is just over this shoulder. Homegrown Cambo corn. Doing really well. Had a really good morning this morning. Was really buttoning up some cases, and then my afternoon fell apart. I have days like that, I guess. Smoking, what is this, a spindle? Spindle from Missouri Meerschaum. Quickly becoming one of my, not one of my favorites, but a very enjoyable tobacco, Cabby's mixture. A little bit wet. And every time I think that I'm going to grab a bowl of it, I don't think of it in time to actually dry it out. A little tangy on the draw. And some spicy perique. I like it. I like spicy food. I thought this might lead into another Cambodia video about food, but I think I'm going to talk about something else in regards to Cambodia. Just because of the unexpected nature of a lot of things that happened today, kind of made me think about one of the questions that we've been asked since we've been back in the States. The question is, what's the hardest thing we faced in Southeast Asia in our time there? The hardest thing, undoubtedly, that I faced in Southeast Asia due to the nature of my purpose there was the fact that I could not protect my family adequately enough. I could not manage by myself to be vigilant enough to protect them 24/7. I think I was mugged once. Twice. My daughter was mugged once. Our house was broken into while we were there once. You have to understand the type of housing arrangement we had. We had a multi-story, very skinny, long home, 4 floors. It would have housed several Khmer families. And for a few $100s, we were able to rent that by the month. in its entirety, which that in and of itself provided a level of security. I lived in a Khmer neighborhood, so I was the only Westerner on the street. I lived in a district, and Totumpung is the name of the district in Phnom Penh, and we were the only Westerners on the street, and so everyone around us was Khmer, and so it made sense for me to rent the entire house, which was just, it's like I mean, if you think townhouse, that's kind of what they're like, but obviously it's not. Concrete structure, tiled halfway up on the walls, tiled floors. Large welded gates that we would padlock every night. That would keep you from coming into our, what we would call a garage, which I didn't have a car, I just had a moto. And then all of our doors were padlocked, and the windows had bars on them. And you'd think it'd be fairly secure. The time that they broke into our house, they actually pried the gate, one of the gates, off the hinges. This was early in the morning, and they stole my moto. They could not breach the first floor, so they climbed up to the second floor, which we had a balcony on the second floor, and pushed those doors in. However, we had those padlocked on the inside. They could not gain entry that way. And about 6 o'clock in the morning, I got a call from my office manager, and he said, "Mark, is anything wrong at your house?" I said, "Yeah." He woke me up. I'm like, "I don't think so." And so my wife's bedroom was on the second floor, and I walked out to that second floor balcony, and I saw the doors were pushed in. So I looked out the window, looking down on the street, and there was a crowd of about 50 people down there, all gathered around my entrance. And then I saw my gate leaning over, and so I realized that there was a security breach. And what really scared me was that my son was on the first floor. His bedroom was on the main floor, and he was the only one that slept down there, and he was 7 or 8 at the time. So I ran down those steps, ran to his room. There's a long hallway that went straight out to the door, and his room was the last one on the right. And as I pushed the door open, he slept in a hammock. My heart just sank, because he was not in his hammock. And you think the worst. I was there for a reason, because kids were being trafficked, and I thought, oh my God, someone's got my son. And he had chosen that night to make a little fort behind some shelves, and he was covered up with a blanket. He looked like a pile of blankets, and that probably was a very good thing. But I found him, and I woke him up, brought him up to the second floor. I ran up to the third floor to check on my daughters, who were up there. They were fine. And then I began to deal with the province police, and it was a mess. Never were going to get that moto back. But I mean, I had things stolen, like my iPhone. I had I mean, taken right out of my hand, and there's not a whole lot you can do. It's not like in the States, like I'm carrying a handgun or something like that. You don't understand what it's like to be living in a foreign culture, and unable to react to the nuances of culture until you've actually done it. And no matter, it doesn't matter how well I knew the language, or how well I knew the city, or how well I knew my tuk-tuk driver, things would happen, and nuances in culture that I paid. I had a very trustworthy tuk-tuk driver, and I paid him a lot of money to keep my family secure as he moved them around the city, and to help provide me information about what was going on in the city. While we were there, they had, similar to what is happening down in Venezuela, but not nearly on the scope of what's happening down there. They had huge, thousands of people demonstrations, and there would be violence. Military would shoot people, and this would crop up in moments. And one time we were at a mall, I think it was on a Sunday afternoon, and we had a tradition that we would go to KFC. They had KFC in Phnom Penh. We would go there once a week just to get a little taste of Western life. You crave that after a while. And while we were there, I saw this dark black billowing cloud from the next block over, and started getting alerts from the embassy and some friends that I had in the State Department. And so we just left our dinner, ran down the steps, got in our tuk-tuk, and I directed the driver, told him where we needed to go, which thankfully was in the opposite direction of the protest. And we made it to our house and got buttoned up. So yeah, the hardest thing about living in Cambodia was the fact that I could not be vigilant enough for my family. And the very last day we were there, I was in a bank making a withdrawal. It was about 11 o'clock in the morning. We were right there on the riverside. It was in a tourist area, generally a pretty safe area. I went into the bank, had to go up to the second floor and make a withdrawal. And my wife and children decided to go down to one of our favorite restaurants there and make reservations for the evening. Because we thought, you know what, we'll eat there at our favorite restaurant the night before we leave. The Khmer Saravan, right there on the river. And I got stuck in a line, and it took me a while. It took me 15-20 minutes to get the withdrawal. I come out, and as soon as I walk out, my phone's just blowing up. My wife's trying to get a hold of me. And my daughter, my eldest daughter, they were all walking down the street. She had her purse over her shoulder, her arm through it like you're supposed to. Two guys came by on a moto, snatched the purse, drug her down the street. And thankfully, some people reacted, and they let go and took off. And generally, the Khmer people would become very embarrassed by that, and they would be very helpful, because they didn't want to be perceived as thugs in their society. And overall, the Khmer people are very gentle and loving people. But every basket's got its bad apples, so that's the hardest thing. That was the stress. I mean, I lived under incredible stress for most of my time there, just due to the nature of the work, rescue work, undercover, and then trying to keep my family safe. And that's part of what caused us to come back a little bit early. Some of the situations there we couldn't change. So yeah, I guess that's Cambodia video number 2. What's the hardest thing about living in Southeast Asia from my perspective of our time there? If you have any questions about our time in Cambodia and Southeast Asia, and feel free to write them down in the comments section. I'd be glad to answer those. try to keep these videos short, but I notice I'm about 15 minutes long here. So anyways, you guys have a great day. My pipe's gone out. I've been talking here, so I'm going to enjoy this Cabby's mixture, and until next time, who's your piper?